Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I'd like to start over in Europe today, and we're going to begin first with this deep low that's curling up right here over this part of the Black Sea. So just geographically, we know that north of this would be Ukraine, and this would be some of the Russian wheat belt here. Now, this deep low that's spinning here just has me thinking a lot about what this precipitation from and around this low and the associated fronts might do, just in parts of Ukraine and Russia. So I was going out here looking at today's 12Z European model run just to keep an eye on that low right there. So get oriented again. This is the Black Sea, there's Ukraine, and here's Russia. As we play this forward, you certainly see the deep lows going way up north here, dragging this large front through. But what I am starting to see here is as that low moves a bit farther to the east, we'll be spreading precipitation across parts of Ukraine, and then eventually later into parts of southern Russia here. We're really bringing in quite a bit of heavy precipitation. It's just important to keep an eye on this as we press forward here through the month of March as to what the weather patterns are doing in this part of the world, including bringing in some very strong winds out of the north into this particular region. Now we add up all that precipitation. Let's just look at a 10-day anomaly map, and we can see that unlike what we've seen lately, there's going to be some wetter conditions in a broad area in and around Ukraine to Belarus, and then I think in this part of Russia. So I just want to keep you posted on this. Something to think about here, I'm just seeing a lot of the footage about what's going on with the war. I did notice that there was a lot of problems with mud, and we were talking about this, my colleagues Matt Reardon, Andrew Pritchard, and I today. So we pulled up some maps showing the percent of soil moisture from the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, and you can see that there's a lot of places, again, this is Belarus, this is Ukraine, and this is Moldova, that have just excessive amounts of moisture in the soil. And we looked at a couple different sources, this being from the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, but the only regions that are showing up with near normal are just this part over here in eastern parts of Ukraine. So I just wanted to provide that context as we kind of go through this second week of what's going on in Europe. From there, I would like to go back to the pattern we saw in the month of February, and I want to pay special attention to this ridge. This has been the ridge that we have been attempting to monitor and forecast its future position into March. And one of the big problems with the ridge in place here is that the pattern was very highly amplified, like this, diving into a deep trough here and running up over a ridge that was kind of stuck out in the North Atlantic. And this was a pattern we really didn't deviate much from throughout the month of February. We had seen some signals that into March things were going to change up, and we're getting the first hints of that throughout the day today. We're looking at some infrared satellite imagery. So really starting late last night, this deep plume of moisture, look at this, pulling just north of Hawaii straight into the Pacific Northwest with the deep low that's now off the coast of the Pacific Northwest. We have not seen these in a very long time. They've all been coming up from the Gulf of Alaska into the Northwest. And this large plume of moisture here, we commonly call these atmospheric rivers, is really delivering a lot of moisture. But what I'm more keyed in on here is how this is a signal of a shift. It means that ridge was not impenetrable. We've moved it, we've broken through it, and we need to see what that's going to mean going forward in the longer term. Because the month of February has been extremely dry throughout the West. In fact, for the start of the year, California and Nevada are likely having their driest starts to the year, but February very dry in parts of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho as well. We key in on this area as well, this spot right here in the western Cornbelt, starting from Wisconsin, coming back to Nebraska, and then down into the Cotton Belt right along the Gulf Coast. So we're looking at these areas to try to identify who could use this precipitation as this pattern changes, and then of course the areas that would like to not see another drop of it, specifically mid-south to the eastern Corn Belt into New England. That's been an area that's been exceptionally wet. We can look at the same information, but just in terms of soil moisture. So this goes down to 40 centimeters, about 16 inches. And there's just a large area in through here that we need to really start to revive the soil moisture in the next 45 days or so before we go into this next growing season as the soils in here start to thaw out. And certainly today and the temperatures this week are going to bring in some warm conditions in through here. But again, we're looking at that soil moisture, and we're going to see how this precipitation pattern is going to impact it. So let's go right to it. The next 10 days, we've got a few systems. The big system right now going into the Pacific Northwest, the deeper trough that ejects the first wave north and the second wave farther to the south. And as we just look out over the next 10 days in terms of precipitation anomalies, a lot of things are changing model run to model run because a lot of this action is coming very late this week into the weekend. But once again, more heavy rain across places that don't want any more of it. But I like to see this. That's good. I like the snow coming into southern parts of Saskatchewan here, Alberta there, and Montana, places that desperately need it. And we're going to talk in a few moments about what the changes might look like for California. All right. So after seeing this, let's go right now into the temperature forecast for the next 10 days. Very mild in the near term, but there will be some much colder air coming out here once we get past that first week of March. And we're going to take a look at that as well as this pattern begins to shift around a bit. Now, the cause of all that shift is, I think, best seen here. We spent so much time in February watching the MJO come over to phase 3, which was in this area, and slowly move just north of Australia into this maritime region here. And what that's allowed us to do is to get the momentum to transfer out into the Pacific and really extend the jet. And that's key to all of this. That extended piece of the jet's what's broken down that more immovable ridge into the northwest, and it's allowing for that moisture to get drawn into that area. And I'll just show it to you. This is where we spent the month of February with the MJO, and now we're getting to see the benefits of that as the MJO starts to leave phase 3. But do you remember how earlier last week the models were very keen on swiping this around at higher amplitude into phases 4 and 5? Since then, they've lost the signal a bit. Can you see how it's now forecast to kind of dump back into null space here? Now, this means that using the MJO at this particular junction going forward, since we've already seen the effect of phase 3, is going to be minimized a little bit. We did get a nice little resurgence of trade winds lately, but our La Niña continues to fade and is still mostly east focused. I also just want to point out there is still cold water that is in parts of the Gulf of Alaska and off the Baja, but I've not seen too much change, especially toward the colder side in this area, and we need to watch that carefully from now through July, actually. That's critical to understanding the risk of drought in the Midwest versus wetter conditions in the West going into spring. So thinking about all of that, let's go take a look at where we expect the MJO to be in the near term. The best velocity potentials keep it somewhere here. So India to Australia. But there's now better rising motion over South America. We're going to talk about that in the South American video that's coming up here in a little bit. What's important to see is that the trade winds, there's still some good, what I would call La Niña-like behavior. Look at these easterlies just pushing hard over the next 15 days. And as we expect coming out of the Indian Ocean, you've got, either slower easterlies or even westerly wind bursts. And then that effect is to make that rising motion in this vicinity. Now the models what they're doing with this is they're keeping that extended jet in place. And we start to see this happen. So this is now week 2. I would like to take you through week 2 all the way out to week 6. Now this ends on March 15th, and as we play through into the 3rd week of March, which takes us out there to the equinox, we've now seen another model run that attempt to move those higher heights back here. So the flow comes around and just hits the west better in that 3rd week, and it really runs across the United States, meaning we're going to see wet conditions across broad areas here. As we just play this on forward, getting to the end of March, the lowest height anomalies just seem to be stretched here, which means the coldest air in the northern hemisphere seems to be locked away between the Canadian archipelago, Hudson Bay, and Greenland. And that's what's going to keep things quite active for much of the U.S. To show you the newest data, let's just go here to U.S. view. I'd like to show you 30 days precipitation anomaly, and let's take this out from, I like this. So the 10th of March through the 10th of April. So better moisture here. This area, unfortunately, is going to stay very wet, especially in the Mid-South. That would be what this pattern would get us. In my opinion, the models are biased too dry here, and they're probably biased too dry into Texas. And what I mean by that is that if we do flatten out that jet stream, and we do keep the extended jet across the Pacific, we're going to get better flow across the United States, and more systems are going to draw more of that moisture farther back to the west. So we'll have to measure against my forecast skill and the European model, but those are a couple things that I'm really seeing that might be kind of critically important to where this is all going. Now, in the near term, you can just see the troughs that love to dive into the west. Look at that. So this is out through next weekend into the 9th, 10th, 11th. Boy, this is an active pattern. We need to talk about what this means for severe weather here. Heavy rains into this area. How far back does the moisture get into the western Cornbelt down to the southern plains? And what about snow getting piled up in the west? So that's what we need to take this discussion now that we've got a sense as to where this is going in the longer term. To do that, I'm just going to dive right on into my multi-model analysis. And I was looking at it before I shot the video. So let me take you back here to where we are today. So as we look at the GFS on the left and the European on the right, you're going to see initially the push of moisture coming into the northwest. and clippers running right through here. Okay, so as we play this from Monday into Tuesday, and now into Wednesday, that's it. You just get the strong moisture push there. There's a little clipper that runs through here by Thursday, but much of the rest of the country is going to be dry. When do we start to see the chances for moisture increase? That would be when the trough finally digs deeper into the Great Basin. It's sitting right here at this point. This is Friday. Moisture comes to California. Desperately need this. Snow from here all the way up to parts of southern Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's in both models. And both models eject the first trough right here. See it? Now, out ahead of it, I will be concerned about the risk for ice in this area, and then heavy snows on the backside, maybe extending from Colorado through Nebraska, North, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. On the southern side of this, we're going to open up to a lot of unstable air, and there's going to be a severe weather outbreak. Likely there could be some on Friday night, but definitely Saturday and Sunday. So as we go from Saturday morning to Saturday midday and to Saturday afternoon and evening, that's system number 1. And it's going to pull through on Sunday morning into parts of Ontario and Quebec and drag that precipitation through the northeast. The model split a bit on the system that follows. Can you see the European versus the GFS has a lingering front here? So what we end up getting is a second round with the European being slower as it normally is than the GFS. But this would be system number 2 that emerges a little bit farther to the south here and then goes straight toward like Lake Huron, just slower in the European model. So that system pulls on through, and then the models attempt to leave a lingering front. This is early next week on the 8th. The Europeans leave it here, and the GFS a little farther to the north. The thing is that along that front there will be some very heavy rainfall. So we've got this idea about where it's going. Let's go in now and take a look at the European model total precipitation. So through Wednesday, Thursday, I'll just stop this. How about Friday at noon? Very dry across a broad sector of the country. There's your clipper coming through, but there's that atmospheric river pushing in some places in coastal Oregon and Washington up to 2 to maybe 6 inches of rainfall. All right. Now after this, that's when the wave ejects. There it is. This is the one that comes out Friday night to Saturday. Love seeing the moisture return here. We need it. Don't want it here. That's too much. And unfortunately, this might come in the form of strong to severe storms. Then we get the second wave right there. So this is now Sunday into Tuesday. And now we've filled in this whole corridor, not only with the risk of severe storms, but also very heavy rainfall. Let's go take a look at the differences in the models. So remember, when you look at this map, these colors are where the GFS is wetter. These colors are where the European model is wetter. And to be honest, there's a lot of things about the GFS runs I would prefer. Like this whole corridor, be better if it was wet, because we're very dry, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and parts of Michigan. We're drier here too, so to bring in that moisture would be good. But if I was in Nebraska, I'd be rooting for the European all day long because of the increased moisture there, but not here in the Mid-South. Too wet. From there, why don't we take a look at the severe storm side of it? Now, this is a mapping system that Andrew Pritchard developed, and what it does is it looks at a severe thunderstorm index, so it's an environmental index. Friday night could look at a narrow corridor right in through here for strong to severe storms, but then as we get into the day on Saturday, that opens up quite a bit more from eastern Texas, possibly even as far north as Iowa. See that? That's the whole corridor which the ingredients might come together. Then we go over to Saturday night, into Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening. And once again, we've opened up this large area for the potential for strong to severe storms. We got to watch that very carefully with the next 2 pulses coming through. In fact, the whole of the Gulf Coast needs to be on alert late this weekend through early next week because of that. From here, I'd like to switch over to snow, and then we'll take a look at longer-term severe weather in just a few moments. Now, before we get into it, through February 28th, I just want to point out this area and through here, which we've looked at several times, this area and through here, parts in New England and Montana. Those are areas that have been in major deficit for snow. And while things look good in the west, remember almost all of this was back in December when they built up this snowpack. Big parts of Oregon, Idaho, we desperately need more snow coming into this area. So we can go out there and look at the next week or so in terms of total snowfall from the operational European. And it does. It brings in better snow to the Cascades and Northern Rockies and then in the Great Basin as that deeper trough comes in. Then the models try to eject that system, bringing snow to Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin need this moisture. This is not yet where we know it will be. The forecast is still too far out. But this is from the clipper coming through and actually sneaks in before all of this and hits New England. So the probability of getting at least 3 inches of snow between now And 10 days from now, back on March 10th, or out to March 10th, is shown in this map. So take a quick look or pause the video to see it a bit closer. Now into week 2, okay, this is where the jet stream starts off on the March 10th. And then it just stays in that deep trough configuration, anchored right here around the Hudson Bay. But this is going to keep things active. It doesn't matter which model you look at. The European model out there to week 2, better moisture in the Northwest and California compared to what we've seen, and this area stays over very wet. And that is not good for this area, which is already in flooding. The GFS basically says the same thing. That's the 12Z GFS. Now, thinking about this longer term, week 2 and beyond, I just want to show you something. This comes from Northern Illinois University. Victor Cassini, good friend of mine, brilliant scientist. He's created these neat long-range forecasts for severe weather. And looking out there into week 2, using the CFS V2, we're just looking for areas we need to be concerned about, because it looks like it's the middle of March, and even the 3rd week of March could continue to see this area having increased threat of severe weather. And that's very consistent with history. Over at the Storm Prediction Center, they did some research. It was a few years ago, but this is still good. This is very solid research that shows that when we have warm phase ENSO, that's El Nino, versus La Niña, well, this is the risk. You can just think of it as the risk area for severe storms. Look at the difference between El Nino years here and La Niña. Much more frequent mid-south to southeast, this area seeing much more frequent severe weather action. So I just want to make sure you know that that's consistent with the fact that we do have this, as we talk about a lot, this fading La Niña in this area. Okay, let's wrap this up with some discussion about temperature. So far, the month of February has been quite cold for much of the country, except over here in the southeast to the mid-Atlantic. That's been an area that's been more mild recently. When we see where these temperatures are going, though, it doesn't look anything like this map. Here's today's highs. We've already seen these. Watch this. This goes into Tuesday and Wednesday. Now we're watching that clipper come out right through here, keeping it cold along the northern tier of the country. But the National Weather Service has high temperatures in the 70s, maybe cracking 80 in Nebraska, Kansas. And then as we go into Thursday, that's when the cooler air comes in behind the clipper and the deeper trough starts to dig here. But look at the warm sector that's still open on Friday, and then getting into Saturday. Now this is the area that I'm going to have to watch to see how much moisture comes up into here to increase that risk of severe storms we talked about. But there's going to be a shot at cold air coming in behind this by Sunday. So if we look out there just exclusively day 5 through 10, now you can start to see the cold air coming in with the last holdout of the warmer air here. This is that pattern that's really doing something like that. And day 10 through 15, been seeing a lot of changes in this, but generally speaking, there's been a cold anchor here, but we've seen the fading of the warmer conditions in parts of the southeast. So we've got to watch this time period very closely. What's complicating this is the polar vortex. Now, you can see where it currently sits. This is exactly where you want it if you don't want it to mess with you. It's very strong and very, sitting over the Arctic and circular. But some of the new forecast data suggest that it's going to go from this record strength position and collapse. See that? And I was just looking at it, and sure enough, the European model's got this in the forecast. So there it is. That's polar vortex. There's some possibility that there's a pinch coming in here. We call this a sudden stratospheric warming event. And that could break the polar vortex as soon as this weekend into 2 pieces. You got one piece settling here over Siberia, another one here over the Hudson Bay. Now, what's important about this is what ends up happening in the following couple of weeks. Because once we get past the end of March, a polar vortex split is rare and having an impact. But where does this deliver cold air? Is it going to be over Europe or Siberia or Russia? Or are we going to risk bringing it here into the United States? Because you go from this weekend into next week, that's a substantial split that could make for a very important transition past mid-month as to where these 2 pieces of the polar vortex go. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. But I don't have enough evidence today to tell you what this might do later in the month. So I'll watch it. I'll keep you up to date, okay? Talk to you again on Thursday. Thank you.